Well, welcome to this evening's play briefing for full title, POTUS, or Behind Every Great Dumbass Are 7 Women Trying to Keep Him Alive, by Selina Fillinger. This one has been a long time coming, and I think we are all ready for a bit of a laugh. Before we begin tonight, I'd like to honour the traditional owners of the land on which we gather, the Turrbal and Yagara people. On behalf of all of the creators on this stage, this evening we acknowledge that this space, this place, has always been a site of storytelling, and it is with honour, privilege and great respect that we add another story to these lands. Well, welcome back to season 2024. My name is Daniel Evans. I'm an associate artist here at Queensland Theatre, and it is my pleasure to be with you all tonight. And what a journey we've been on this year. So far we've been back in time to a gaslit drawing room in 1901, across the sweaty football fields of 37, into the glass-encased bedroom of Jasper and Leon in Medea, and just last week we left cost of livings at New Jersey for a short hike up the road to the White House for this femme-fueled farce. POTUS begins with one 4-letter word that rocks the Oval Office to its core. When the President unwittingly spins a PR nightmare into a global crisis, the 7 brilliant women he relies upon most risk life, liberty and the pursuit of sanity to keep the Commander-in-Chief out of trouble. Set over one very, very eventful day. Doors open and close, secrets leak and spill, wars break out, people break down, and the most powerful man on top just might be toppled by a woman at the bottom. No, this is not non-fiction. But, given the events of the past 24 hours, it reads more like something of a prophecy. This play was written in 2022, and any similarities to events or people, alive, dead, or nearly dead, is purely coincidental. Now, a star-spangled show requires a star-studded cast, and just beside me sit some of the most funniest, fiercest, and fabulous female performers in the country, and John. So, I'm going to ask each of you to introduce yourselves, but I'm going to start with their leader and director. She left us as an AD, but has returned as a companion of the Order of Australia. Would you please welcome back Leela OAM? How are you?
Hi.
Hi, how you going?
Very happy to be back.
Do we have to curtsy now when we see you?
You definitely have to.
I'll start practicing that, Your Honour, Your Highness. We might start from the other end. Hello, at the end of the line. What is your name, and who are you?
I'm Brady, and I'm the composer sound designer. I'm Emily, and I play Jean.
Hi, I'm Kristen O'Leary, and I play Harriet.
Hello, I'm Wendy, and I play Chris.
Hello, I'm Amy, and I play Stephanie.
Hello, I'm Jodie and I play Bernadette.
I'm John, I'm the lighting designer.
I'm Lee, I'm playing the director.
And my name's Paula, and I play Margaret.
And I'm just dead. But we're going to ask a whole series of questions tonight, but the point of this is not for me to ask all the questions. So if you're sitting there and you have any question about casting, rehearsal, what we might see in the play, if there's any little question you want to know about anything that happens behind the curtain, please have a little think to yourself, and I'm going to come to the audience soon so that you guys can ask as many questions as you would like. But first, Lee, I always start with you, but it's just a routine now. I know that you've often wondered whether with this one you are making a farce or a documentary, and I would like to know where you're sitting today, of all days, given the 24-hour news cycle we find ourselves in.
I'm just really relieved to be doing the play because last Sunday when I woke up and read the news, I thought, if he doesn't survive, we have to cancel the play. Because it would be in very bad taste. It's not about him, but making comedy on the back of the death of someone, I just kind of went, So it's sitting pretty close to current events, and there's nothing that's on stage that doesn't seem quite real. Every day there are different sentences that are striking us differently. So it's really feeling like tragedy fast equals farce. there's some big politics inside there, and with the potential for Kamala Harris to be running for president, I go, a lot of the sentences in the play are banging around in our heads today in ways I wouldn't have imagined were possible when I read the play last year.
Yes. I want to ask you that. I don't want to touch on how it's definitely changed, but when you first read it, what struck you about the play? 'Cause I was upstairs, and I remember you coming up to my desk and going, it's this one, this is the play, you've got to read this. And I read it and went, of course it is. But what was it about? Do you remember what it was exactly about this when you first read it? When were you in, I guess?
Oh, it had me at the first word.
I thought that might be the case.
No, look.
Which is the C word, by the way. Just
yeah.
warning.
And you go, well, in the scheme of America, okay, I'm going to tell you a little story about David Williamson. I directed David Williamson's Rupert for Melbourne Theatre Company, and we took it over to the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. Now, you all know David doesn't swear very much in his plays, but in this particular play, it was Frank Packer was in a scene with someone, and Frank dropped the C-bomb. Yeah, I can't hear no. And David said that's exactly what he said at that particular point. So he wanted it on stage, but this was a huge problem because the Americans don't curse, and they definitely don't say that word on the Eisenhower stage at the Kennedy Center when this is a diplomatic mission. This play happening. There was this big embassy event on the rooftop, and Kim Beazley was the ambassador, and they were all panic-stricken that this was happening. So an Australian playwright has the honour of having dropped the C-bomb for the first time on the Eisenhower stage in DC. And I remember talking to the actor Bert Labonte, who was playing the character, and I said, Bert, when that happens, there won't be any laughter. And he went, of course there'll be laughter. He was like, what do you think, I can't make them laugh? And I'm like, no, there really won't be. And thank heavens I warned him, because he said it on opening night and there were crickets. Because men may swear in male company and women will swear in female company, but in mixed company it is absolutely taboo. Especially when everybody's at work, which is an opening night. So, when I saw that on the page for a play that was on Broadway, it was an aggressive political act by a young female playwright who was making a protest play about the hypocrisy of the confinement of female behaviour in America. And the fact that Susan Stroman, an extraordinary female director, put it straight onto Broadway with no out-of-town tryout. They just backed it. It was such an aggressive political act by a young female playwright, and I could feel that shimmering and that courage, and from there it went. Like beyond that word, there are some of the smartest political observations of what it is to be a female working in the power structures of America. I just went, I really want this, because we're in direct relationship to American behavioural systems now, and I don't want a lot of the American judgments falling on Australian women. I grew up as a young Australian woman with a sense of courage and of freedom. When I went to America to study there, I was horrified by how conservative they were in the judgment of women. And so if there is a young woman there trying to make that change, then I think backing her on the other side of the planet is a huge thing to do.
We'll move on to these amazing actresses in a second, but one more question. Our designer, Christina Smith, is not here tonight. She's unfortunately unwell, but you are watching the kind of world in broken pieces, and you can kind of see, I guess, the central gesture of what this design is going to become. This is the first time the actors have seen this set, so it's quite exciting. Lee, what was some of the thinking, yours and Christina's thinking, when you were conceiving the world of this play?
Well, obviously we're really influenced by the West Wing and Veep, and the walk and talk of those spaces. And so it was a farce with 7 women, and we ended up with 7 doors.
Brilliant.
And that seemed to make sense. And all of the doors and the small rooms that people go in and out of, there are so many different rooms that this story happens in. So Christina came up with a way of moving us through these different rooms. And then it was just that lovely thing of working with the neoclassical architecture of DC, and that thing of something that's really impressive. And one of the things I adore about Queensland Theatre is the remarkable carpentry of the workshop.
Are you going to talk about the other C word? Cornices?
Cornices. Yes, cornices. So it felt like she landed on this design quite quickly. And then she was like, should we be coming up with other ideas? I'm like, no, I love this. So she wanted to throw the focus onto the characters, the women, and the colour of the women, the richness of the women. And so this white backdrop was very much about making sure that all of the focus is on them.
Great. I want to talk a bit more about the world of the work. Kristen O'Leary and Emily Burton, hello. Hi, darling.
Hello.
Your two characters bring us into the play, and in fact, you kind of set up the world and the stakes for us. I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about your respective characters and the world that you kind of land us in very quickly.
Passing the buck to
You
each
say
other.
the first words.
Yeah, first, I play Harriet, and I'm the President's Chief of Staff. So Harriet is a person who has dedicated her professional life to her professional relationship with this man who has ascended to the position of POTUS. She sacrificed a lot to do that with her eye on her own political aspirations, but she has sacrificed a lot personally to do that. She's right at the crucible of his existence as a political figure. She's his political advisor and his personal confidant through pretty much everything that happens in his life. Emily's character describes me in the first scene as his right hand, and that's pretty much what Harriet is. And as a result of that, she is, when Dan talks about being thrust into the world, the play does thrust you immediately into a crisis. It opens with a crisis and it just rolls from there. So you're being met in a world where the stakes are high and people are very quickly having to think on their feet as to how they're going to deal with this crisis that's hit them.
And what is that crisis, Kristen?
Well, I don't want to give the game away.
This is a day when there's 40 world leaders at the White House to negotiate and sign a nuclear non-proliferation treaty. So nothing can go wrong in this day. And yet, the very first thing that happens is an error on the part of the president. And so to make this day work, which has obviously been worked towards for a long time, they have to try and fix it. And as they try and fix it, it gets worse and worse. So it's the worst of days that this could happen in.
And Emily, you get kind of, Kristen's character kind of handballs you, that big crisis.
As the press secretary.
Yes.
And tell us about your character. What's her name and what's she like?
So I play Jean, who is press secretary, and Jean self-describes her role as someone who needs to look on the bright side of things. So I think that kind of is a good indicator of how Jean rolls with stuff. She genuinely does try to look on the bright side, but the course of events really test that at every turn. And as crises on crises just stack up, one thing that I think is really fun, particularly with Harriet and Jean, is they are two incredibly capable women who are so equipped to be dealing in an environment that is so fast-paced and so cutthroat, and to see all of their tactics and their strategies get tested and watch them slowly crumble at different times is very fun to play, and really fun to play between each other, because they kind of take turns. They're a bit of a duo in many ways. So that's really enjoyable.
Awesome. I'm going to come to Paula. You play one of the most powerful women in the world in this play. You are FOTUS. No pressure. But how do you go preparing for a role like this when that comes across your desk?
Well, it doesn't come across my desk very much, because one, I don't have a desk, and two, it just doesn't. But I prepare by... I'm quite... I'm a bit of a buff when it comes to American stuff, history, as well as, and at the moment, very current day. So I spend a lot of time reading and watching a hell of a lot of documentaries, and sometimes lectures as well, which I love. Because I do that thing of going, I've got to be as smart as her. But, you know, I'm clearly playing a woman who is a huge overachiever. But I love it so much because it makes me want to reach, and it teaches me so much about women, particularly in this particular world, because I'm very rarely in the corporate world, as you can imagine. So I have a deeper appreciation now for how difficult it is. And even watching Kamala at the moment going, you know, the amount of boots that are already flying her way and the amount of sticks she's already been getting, the scrutiny that she's just absolutely under, particularly because she is a woman, is just, it has already broken my heart today to see what she's up against. But so yeah, that's how I prepare. I just try and stay well connected and reading as much as I can, and I kind of don't stop. And yeah.
Oh, cool. I'm gonna come to two very different characters to that now, played by Jodie and Amy. I laugh, I giggle because these two are sort of like the troublemakers, maybe, in the play. They kind of... Things are going really, really bad. And then these two make it go really, really that much worse. Your two characters are sort of linked in a strange way. And I'm not sure how much you want to spoil tonight. But do you mind telling us about who you play and how you, let's say, complicate things for everyone else sitting on this stage?
I'm just going to jump in and say, Jodie's visiting the White House.
Yes.
Bernadette is visiting the White House, but I'm not going to tell you who she plays.
Oh, okay, copy.
Yeah, no. I visit the White House, so my character does have a criminal past, so she has actually been in prison and has been given the privilege of a presidential pardon. So she's a tattooed queer woman who's an opportunist, I guess. She's street smart, quite charismatic. And it does beg the question, why is she in the White House and what's she doing there? So, I mean, yeah, I come into the play a little bit into the play and make a whole lot of trouble for everybody. So you're just going to have to come and see what she's doing there.
It's the visitors to the White House that cause most of the problems, though. There's another visitor, she's missing, that's Emily Liu. She's not well, so she's not here tonight. But she visits the White House as well. And between the two of them, you break the White House pretty much, yeah.
Literally.
Yeah, well, I do belong there. I'm the presidential secretary. But she's very good at her job, but has, like, crippling insecurity. So... she's got lots of internal struggles, and we cross over because I partake in things that she brings that shouldn't be there. I got into her treat bag, in a manner of speaking, and then just watch Stephanie go. Really, just... She's having the time of her life while everybody else is in a puddle of shit. So...
I want to make it very clear that Amy Ingram chose the role.
Yeah.
Amy and I have worked together and before, and so I just sent her the script and I said, you know, apart from the Chief of Staff and FLOTUS, choose your role, whatever you want to do. And she chose it, I'm just saying.
Yeah. So we disrupt a lot of things. They have to... well, you also have to manage me, oddly enough. You have to manage me a lot of the time.
Yeah, I've changed. After prison, I'm like on the straight and narrow.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Brilliant.
It's good.
A lot of fun.
Yeah. There is one more outsider, I guess, to proceedings, or not really an outsider, an unofficial outsider, and that is Wendy Mockey's character of Chris, who is a journalist, and hasn't she chosen the best day to cover the White House?
Great timing.
She catches wind of a sex tryst, a cover-up and some extortion, just a usual day at the White House. Can you tell us a little bit about Chris and perhaps some of the trials and tribulations that she's facing as she even just begins the day?
Yeah, absolutely. So Chris is an ambitious Times journalist who's there on the fateful day. And like any other, I guess, hardworking sort of mums who are trying to balance their careers and family, the things that are providing obstacles for her are basically she has to breastfeed, so she's got that problem of leaky boobs. So that's wonderful. And an annoying ex-husband, #relatable. And also young kids with food allergies. Who needs that? On top of trying to get to the bottom of the stuff that everyone's trying to hide. Dun, dun.
And trying to convince her boss not to send the younger male reporters to replace her. That assurance says, I can do the job despite all the obstacles.
Yeah, so she's wonderful in that I kind of see her as, again, an outsider, but also kind of like everyone's eye into the White House, because everybody works there, where I think Chris is like the voice of the people, kind of witnessing everything, being like, this is kind of crazy. So it's been great sort of exploring that in the rehearsal room in terms of, being able to play in the world of a farce.
When does someone who's supposed to tell us the truth become part of the cover-up? Which, again, creepily close to questions about what's been happening in the last year or two in the White House. And you kind of go, there are obviously a lot of people wrapped around a president trying to say, no, he's fine, he's fine. At what point does it all fall apart? So a representative of that, if you like. So this is what I mean, it's not about that. And importantly, Selina Fillinger started writing it back in 2016. But she was smart enough to not make it about any one president. It's a satire about the institutional structure and the flaws within it. So you can't, any assumptions that you make will be unpicked by her. It's very smart.
It is smart. It's also, it is just incredibly funny. I was lucky enough to see a stumble of this a couple of weeks ago, I think, when we just put it together, and was losing myself then about how ridiculous and ludicrous and amazingly funny the whole thing was. I'm wondering, in theory we have a term called corpsing, and that basically means to laugh on stage at the most inappropriate time. And we call it corpsing because if you corpse, especially in a drama, you basically murder the entire play / scene. So you don't want to do it. And I'm wondering, has anyone corpsed in rehearsal at anything anyone's done?
Every day.
Everyone.
Is there a prime offender? Is anyone just absolutely the worst
Emily
person
Burton, absolutely.
Emily, are you guilty as charged? Who sends you off? Who sends you the most?
Everyone.
Yeah.
Everyone. Anything. It's just everyone's so funny. I can't help it. I've got to get it all out in rehearsal so that I'm okay.
If you see her turning her face upstage, that's what she's doing.
She's just losing it. Okay, I'm going to come. Brady, sound designer and composer. How are you at the end there? We're so far apart.
You.
How are you?
Good, thank you.
There's quite a palette to draw on here. I mean, you're taking on kind of like capital A America. What sort of things have you and Lee talked about, or what kind of oral world are you kind of summoning on this one? Are you referencing any dramas, the anthem? What's been in your kind of treat bag or playlist? What have you been listening to as you've been making up the soundtrack?
Our first port of call was listening and looking at a lot of Aaron Copland's work, so his most famous piece being Fanfare for the Common Man. And from there, and that listening to that kind of palette and really capitalist American grand orchestral music kind of went from there, and have pulled from a lot of American composers like late 1800s, early 1900s, and building kind of a musical landscape that feels like outside of a farce, probably pretty serious and a little bit West Wing, but in the context of what we're working with here, just amps up the absolute ridiculousness of the situations that we're looking at on stage. So it's been really funny putting it into rehearsals and watching everyone listen to it for the first time, comes straight in after their line as like a bit of scene change music, and everyone just go, oh, this is ridiculous, I love it, and leaning in. So yeah, just adding a little bit of energy in that way, and location and time.
It's very good, it's very funny. It's like a little sting. It's cool. John, how are you?
Very well, thank you. Just came back from a week putting cost of living into the Sydney Theatre Company, and I can report it was received spectacularly.
Oh, brilliant.
So we've done well.
Although a lot colder down there than here. But Bath is extra warm. This play moves pretty fast, and it's on a double revolve.
Yes, it is.
And I keep thinking, how do you light it? And it's a good thing you're here, because you're lighting it.
When I've solved that, I'll let you know. Yes, there are just straight technical challenges. 2 revolves with walls attached, and the action continues whilst those things go around. My job as a technical exercise is to make the increasingly fractured world feel visually supported. It starts off fairly conventionally, and then as the farce continues and the world they're living in becomes a little more like a fractured fairy tale or something, so too I imagine that the lighting will be able to take some license to reflect that, so that when we're performing with walls askew, and people walk and talk, always a challenge for designers, doors, always a challenge for lighting designers, those sorts of things. But as those of you who have heard me before, it's my job is to support both the performers in what they're doing, so they feel that the environment in which they're operating fits plausibly with what they're trying to do, and then to give you a bit of a visual language into it to accentuate where I can the arc of the play. And can I just say, as some of you may have noticed, I'm the only male, that I have been quite humbled and so admiring of this cast working with Lee. You are in for such a treat. It's one of the hardest forms to deliver. Nothing is funny within the farce for the characters, and the depth of their care for the characters and what makes their plight real is extraordinary, and just the discussions and the sheer approach. It's been, as I say, it's been quite humbling to be the one guy in the room, and I really, really urge you to come and see some very fine stagecraft.
Oh, top review from John. Now, I'm going to come out to the audience. Does anyone have any burning questions they would like to ask about anything perhaps they heard there in that last 20 minutes, half an hour that they'd love to know more about? Have a little think. If there's anything you want to ask. Oh, well, hello. Hello, long-time listener, frequent caller. So the question is, well, it was more of an open-ended question. Comment to the fact that there's a double revolve, 7 doors, walls moving, things opening and closing, things getting a bit faster, a bit more chaotic.
Yeah.
Response.
Well, you have to build the impression of chaos, not let it be chaotic. So there's a lot of control. And look, you don't become a director because you're not a control freak. So I love this stuff, but it's also only possible with an extraordinarily experienced cast, because you're asking people to maintain incredibly intense and precise performance with walls and floors moving. So it's one of those great moments where it's like going to the circus and you see the high wire act and you go, don't try this at home. It's years and it's hundreds of years of performing experience, if not thousands, standing on this stage. And even then, everybody's nervous because, you know, a lot of moving parts. So it's kind of fun to try and pull off something like this, but it's petrifying too. Because it's one thing to say farce, but it's another thing when you lose sight of whether it's funny or not, because it's a lot of tragedy sitting inside it. It's really hard material. It's like looking at Stephanie. we laugh about someone who's, got this very important position who has crippling confidence issues. Honestly, sometimes that's me. And, those moments when she overhears something said about her, her world falls apart. So that's just straight pain that Amy's playing with. And that's the kind of intensity that happens with each of the characters so that they're human. But once it's moving at speed, it will be fun for the audience, but it's not fun to make. Some of the conversations there's a lot of honesty that sits under farce. And the strangest thing is, I don't know of any other farces for women. 7 women in a farce. They're usually the offsiders to the male characters. So we're working in uncharted territory at the moment. So maybe it's funny. Maybe I've taken a perfectly good comedy. Okay, cool. I can't tell at this point because my heart hurts for each of them. Yeah, and it gets harder and harder through the play. Like there are big questions they have about their capacity as women to work in the future, which all of us face.
Yes, hello. Question for Lee. What's your journey been like as a female director?
Really complicated. I'm part of a next, I would call it a next generation of female directors. There are women like Robin Nevin and Gail Edwards and Marion Potts who've been ahead of me, if you like. So I don't pretend to have faced the difficulties that they faced. And I know of women who just gave up because it was too hard. But there have been, and I've just worked and worked and worked and worked, and all you can do is keep working, but there's no question. In talking to my peers, my male friends who are directors, they don't face the sort of vitriol that comes at female directors, to be really honest. Since I became an artistic director, I've faced a lot of opposition from unhappy men who think I'm taking their work away from them. And that, I'm part of the generation that's changing that. It doesn't make it pleasant. So all I do is put that all in a box and put the box on the shelf and keep working and take the next job and lose myself in the joy of the rehearsal room, because every rehearsal room I work in is joyful. Getting to create ideas that transmit to an audience that maybe change the world, that's what you do it for. So as much as it sucks, it's an amazing profession, and I'm incredibly lucky. And to get to make a farce, a female farce, I get to do that, and I get to pick up the phone and say to Kristen O'Leary, "Hey, will you do this?" And because the script is so great, she's like, "Yes." And so gathering people for plays that I really believe in, I would not change anything I've done, anything, as complex as it is. And I look at the next generation of female directors who take for granted that the work should be available and there should be equity in the theatre companies. That's happening. And so I go, they don't face that same obstacle. They'll face other obstacles because there's still some big old glass ceilings that are sitting there, and I'm a bit bruised at the moment, to be really honest. And that's okay. I'll just move on to the next show and just keep making plays. Sorry, there's probably more than you anticipated, but that's just where I'm at.
Thank you. Thank you for your question. Any other questions out there? Yes, here. The question for those who didn't hear, the question is, in America, it's been said that you play comedy for funny, or farce for funny, but in the UK you play farce for tragedy. What is the tradition that you're leaning into here, Lee? Or is it a hybrid of the two, or response?
I think we're definitely pulling towards the tragedy, in a way. But as Australian theatre makers, we tend to bridge the two traditions and pick and choose as we see fit. It's definitely different making this story for an Australian audience. Our relationship to the Americans is different, obviously. But we tend our comedy traditions tend to be a little bit more British. But we've been so influenced, again, by American television. So it's a strange hybrid. And I think I'm quite glad when American playwrights can't come and see how we perform, because I think they get confused. We make it work for here, because we're making it work for an Australian audience. And also, it's a much, this is going to sound really racist, the Australian theatre-going audience is much better educated here in Australia than in America. In the state theatre company space, with the plays that we put on, the theatrical literacy is much greater. So what you can do, how you can push the audience, is a lot more extreme, both in design but also in craft. So the difference between, yes, I think the Americans on the Broadway production played it a lot more for comedy. I've only seen little snippets of it, but I was like, oh, that's a bit obvious, isn't it? So making it not obvious, giving it the level of detail that's possible in a space like the Bill Brown is kind of amazing. The texture of performance that you see when you can sit this close to the performance, as opposed to on a big proscenium, much more like the Playhouse stage. Like the way it can be performed, I think, is actually a lot closer to how she wrote it. But I won't know, because she's not coming, and that's okay.
Let's bring her out. No, I'm kidding. Up the back there. Ooh. I'll just recap that. I'm going to try and do, what an eloquent observation. In America, they find it quite funny that we, as Australians, can poke fun so much at our political leaders. It's a bit of a tension point between us and them. What was the second part of that question? How is it received? How is it received overseas?
Well, the Americans had a lot of difficulty promoting this because of the language in the play. They had to warn people about the language because it's deeply offensive there. It's less offensive here. Our relationship to swearing is very different to the Americans. I'm not saying that we swear like they do here, but we're a little bit more forgiving and robust in understanding context and pressure on people. A little less precious of ear, shall we say. So they had difficulty with promotion of it, but it did very well. It did very well in the American style. And there are other productions happening around America at the more risque theatres outside of New York. I think there's one going on over in LA, the cities. Not so much, Chicago, New York, LA. Yeah. So, look, I think it was always a very brave act. And I think, honestly, that's why they went straight to Broadway, because there was no way they could open this give it an out-of-town tryout. And I think going straight to Broadway put them, with a limited season, put them in touch with the most literate audience there. So they weren't looking for an open-ended run on it. And that's usually how you can tell that they don't think there's a Midwest audience for it. Essentially people coming from the Midwest a lot would go, I don't want to see that potty mouth play. And you go, okay, sure. But I like to think that the writing world has opened up a little bit and that we're starting to influence the Americans, especially the writers. So they're starting to write more complex works in a more visible space.
Another question. I think I saw a question before. Was it over here? No? Yes.
Lee mentioned about promoting this story for an Australian audience, but it's about American concepts. So will the language and the speech be in American dialect or Australian dialect?
Will the language or in idioms be in American dialect or Australian dialect, Lee?
Definitely an American, and it's been awesome fun watching everybody have to wrestle their mouths into the scale of American political speak. Kristen O'Leary, I'm just going to start with you. Your favourite phrase, my love?
Non-proliferation discussions. Oh my God. I have to say that phrase so many times in this play, and I just practiced it for months before I started rehearsals, just because it's a mouthful. There's a lot.
Emily, what's your hardest thing to say?
Nuclear war? For some reason that got... Yeah, nuclear. Nuclear war. There's a lot of hard R's in there that we're not used to doing.
Yeah.
That one took me a bit to get around.
Amy, do you have a favourite line that you get to say in an American accent?
No, but I, from day dot, just couldn't seem to say the word declarative, just as Amy. So I had that problem first, and then I popped the accent on top of it. But I can say it now, so declarative.
What about Wendy? Do you have a favourite line, or is there anything that you struggle with to say in an American accent? Wendy?
No, I'm the same as Kristen, non-proliferation discussion. I had to stop to think about it that time. Still, yeah.
You gotta keep
going. Yeah.
Love it. What about you, Jodie? Do you have a favourite line?
Oh, just the R's. There's so many R's. So I think he thinks I sold him some bad stuff and overcharged him for it. I mean, I did, but...
What about you, Paula?
Oh my God. I get lost in enjoying everybody, and then I know it's coming to me, but I have nothing to say.
Pause.
I like the one, the Female Models of Leadership Council.
Yeah, that's good.
Female Models of Leadership Council. And I get the lovely thing of sitting on the outside and just saying when it doesn't sound right. I never have to get it right at speed. So there's getting it right. I remember talking to Kristen about 6 months ago, and she's like, I'm just going to learn it. I'm just going to learn it, and I'm going to know it by the time I walk in for the first day of rehearsal. She said, I can't be learning this on the floor.
Because it's very wordy. It's a fast show, but it's a very dense show. It's verbose, and so it's actually half the skill, I reckon, of what we're trying to do is trying to get those words out of our mouths and get the arguments clear and go like the clappers. There's a lot on that page.
Yeah, it's kind of like a restoration comedy meets The West Wing. So a bit of Aaron Sorkin in there, and you've got to think she's Selina Fillinger is 29 now, 29. She grew up. Well, she was little when The West Wing was on, and then with Veep and the fast TV writing. So actually, I think that's why it's going to be better here, honestly, than on Broadway, because on Broadway they were mic'd and it was slow. Because that's what happens with microphones. You have to go slower or the sound distorts. Whereas in this space, with the speed that we have, I think probably the first scene is quite Shakespearean. Once you've survived the first scene, your ear will be fine. But, don't be tired coming to this play.
It's so funny because it's true. It moves so fast. There are revolves and there are swinging doors. But you're right. The speed and electricity at which those lines fly out of all your mouths is also another feat to behold. Whoa.
And can I just say one thing about the speed? The playwright has been so clever because all playwrights give us guidance as to, of course, in their punctuation. But she's got a whole string of little keys for us, like sentences that won't have ellipses on the end of them, but there just is no punctuation on the end. So the next line shaves, the next person's line shaves your line. And then she'll have overlaps. And then she'll have the very precisely placed pause. But so you've got a whole mix there's a nuance of punctuation that little guidelines for us as to how we have to land lines and shave time. And
It's like it's got its own separate coda.
Yeah.
And each character also has its own way of dealing with those things as well. And so it's kind of fun to play around with what does my exclamation mark mean versus what does your exclamation mark mean, you know, and all that kind of stuff. So, so there's moments in the play where we'll be rehearsing and then someone goes, wait, is that a slash? Wait. And so you're like doing like the slash check and then you're like, is that, wait. And so, yeah.
Is that a full stop?
Yeah.
There are 3 moments in the play where she just puts a semicolon on a line all by itself. And you go, what is she reaching towards? You know, she's reaching towards an expression on the page that is something beyond the vocabulary that she has. And you just go, there's permission in that. Wonderful permission. And also a poor playwright who's trying to indicate across to the other side of the planet something different.
But also, she's really good at swearing and she's really good at insults. Like, you'll come away with a lot of insults for the next time you face down a parking inspector or someone, I find.
Well, did you Unveep,
Just
which
bonus.
is written by my favourite writer, Armando Iannucci, who also wrote Thick of It, the British comedy. On Veep, they had a person whose job it was to come up with insults because they needed so many. And you feel, again, that dexterous and clever insults are really...
Shakespearean, almost Shakespearean insults.
insults.
That's amazing. We've got time for a couple more questions. Any questions floating around that everyone's burning to ask that we really need to know? Yes?
Just out of interest, the States is obviously changing quite rapidly. How much license will the cast have to modify some of the dialogue and perhaps bring in current references?
The States are changing. Is there any chance to change some of the references?
If there's something that happens in the next few weeks that makes something distasteful, I'll contact the playwright and ask her if we can take it out or write something different. But otherwise, we do it as written. We don't have any permission to make significant changes. There are changes that happen because there's a different shape stage. Sometimes there are things that we can't pull off in this configuration. Those are minor spatial things. But otherwise, we try to do everything as written. As complex as that can be at various points, because you're trying to figure out, especially the physical life of the play, was worked out with a very different cast. And the descriptions, sometimes we're going, hang on, her hand would have to be there. It's like doing Infernal Twister across countries.
Do you have a question? Yes, in the pink. Yes. Was this play deliberately programmed in the lead into the elections?
This play was programmed because, as you may have noticed, we had a large play for 10 men. And I thought if I didn't find something to offer to the women of Queensland, the female actors of Queensland, and then that's just how the year played out. So no, it wasn't like, oh, this would be great in the run-up. Sometimes the programming gods allow you to, I don't know, seem smarter than you are.
Okay, one more question. Yes, up the back.
I'm just wondering, with the dialogue and the revolves and everything, is it a fairly minimalist furnishing and...
With the revolve and the dialogue and everything going on, is it a minimal design world?
Yeah, it's not empty and it's not minimalist as such, but yes, there are only a few pieces of furniture. We don't get into realistic office space, a few gestures. Because all of that furniture has to be moved onto the revolve and off the revolve. So I have 2 fabulous ASMs, Tiani and Leela, who will be dressed in suits. You will see them in the background.
Secret Service.
Secret Service, yes. If they've got comms on, that's serving double duty at the moment. But fortunately, not too many props.
We just commented that we really like the less complicated sets because your eye gets distracted by details.
Sometimes the detail's great. There's a life and a world that gets built, but other times when you want to keep your eyes on the faces of the actors because the density of information is in the words, it's sometimes easier in a cleaner space. Then it all comes down to the lighting, really. And
All roads lead back to John.
yes.
Chuckers.
There is always that moment, there, Dan, don't you find? You go, I can't hear them. Can you turn up the lights?
Yeah.
Because actually it's amazing how much we do lip read in the theatre anyway, and so we do need to... A friend works in dance, and I always am so jealous he doesn't have to light the faces.
And without me, it's radio.
That's true. That's very true. And on that note, it is time for the raffle. So would you please withdraw your tickets? Now, this is the best part. We know this is why you come. And tonight's prize is illustrious. It's brilliant. It is the perfect pre-show warm-up. It is a beautiful, beautiful hamper of wine from our friends at Cloverleigh Wine Estate. It is delicious. It's every sort of flavour of wine you could possibly ask for. Now, who would like to should we get the OAM? Should we get the OAM to do the honours? Oh, we have 2 draws. What's the second one? Let's do first draw, OAM. And the winner is, drum roll.
It is purple E34.
Oi! They're in the maroon jumper. And I just found out there is one more hamper. They've been so gracious at Cloverleigh Estate Wines, they've given us 2 hampers. So, can I please get, who would like the honours? Oh, let's go down the middle. Let's go, actually, I think, Amy, you're enjoying a glass of Cloverleigh wine right now, so why don't we get you to draw that for us? Okay, here we go, run. And drum roll. And the winner is...
Blue. All blue. You can stay. Everyone else, get out. A. 23.
Hey! Now to redeem your prize, just see Gracie on the exit, and she will have your hampers ready for you. Finally, thank you so much to the cast and crew of Full Title, POTUS, or Behind Every Dumbass, are 7 women trying to keep him alive. And while they do that, they are very funny. Lee, I can assure you, they are funny. I was lucky enough to see a stumble a couple of weeks ago, and there were people corpsing all over the place. Yes, Emily Burton was the capital offender. But I can promise you, it is terribly funny, it's ferocious, and it's frighteningly timely. On behalf of everyone here and the company, we wish you all the best for the week ahead, and for the season ahead, it is going to be a hoot as we lift the roof of this place with all of the laughter. So, on behalf of all of us, thank you so much for being here tonight, and have a great season. And finally, to you, our audience, travel safe. We'll see you in the theatre real soon. I'm Jen Evans. Good night.